The Dark Crystal Minute is brought to you by Dream Fasting, the Dark Crystal Experience, a Facebook group on the Dark Crystal by fans for fans. To join the group, search on Facebook for Dream Fasting, the Dark Crystal Experience.
Another world, another time, in the age of wonder.
You are listening to the Dark Crystal Minute.
And begin all the same. Sometimes good, sometimes bad.
And now once more the world must undergo a time of testing.
It is time to return to the castle.
There is much to be learned, and you have no time.
And here's your hosts, Philip Mitchell and JM Prater. Hello and welcome to the Dark Crystal Minute. This is, I guess, the first episode of the Dark Crystal Minute, but we're going to call it episode 0. I'm Philip Mitchell, and I'm from Trial by Stone, the Dark Crystal podcast.
And I am JM Prater, and I am the head runner for Perfect Organism, the Alien Saga podcast.
And this is a very first episode in which I guess I'll explain what this whole podcast is about. So the Dark Crystal Minute is going to be a really deep insight with the film, the cult classic Jim Henson film, The Dark Crystal. And in each episode, we will be looking deep into each minute and pretty much discussing about what happens in that minute. And this podcast has sort of been inspired by the Star Wars Minute, which that was probably the very first podcast that started this trend of what they call the movies by minutes podcast genre, which with those kind of podcasts, again, pretty much in a similar way, they will look into 1 minute film at a time for each episode and chat about it, and which is great. And I mean, you can check out the website moviesbyminutes.com, and there's a big list of all the podcasts out there of that sort of same genre that you can check out. So, which is great, and it's like, it's building up a lot. So there's a lot of podcasts out there, and I guess I might as well explain why we decided to do the Dark Crystal Minute. One, it was just something that's been on my mind for a very long time of wanting to do something like this, and also I think two, because I guess of the recent announcements with the Dark Crystal, a new series coming to Netflix in a couple of years' time, that I thought, well, this is probably a great time to do a show like this, to really look inside the film as we have that build up that anticipation for the brand new series that's going to come out. I thought it's best, with this episode in particular, to sort of really get to know a bit about ourselves as the hosts of the Dark Crystal Minute. So this is what this first episode is really going to be about. So first of all, I might as well ask yourself, Jamie, how did you discover the Dark Crystal?
Well, the Dark Crystal for me was one of those things that kind of came along after Star Wars, because I'm sure, like you, Star Wars was a part of my life since my earliest memories. It was the first film I'd seen in the theater. Return of the Jedi was the first film I'd seen in the theater when it was released. Actually, strike that. Empire Strikes Back was, but I was so young I couldn't remember it. But when I saw Return of the Jedi, I was 7, and I saw it a bunch of times in the theater. So, long story short, Star Wars was with me, but I didn't discover the Dark Crystal until it was on VHS. And I still remember what the VHS looked like. I remember looking at it like it was a treasure. I remember I had to borrow it from a friend. And of course I'm young, so I'm trying to get this movie because I was seeing it on a TV screen in a friend of mine's house. And I saw it, and I was like, well, what is this movie? What is this movie? I'd never seen anything like it before. I hadn't seen Labyrinth. This was even after Labyrinth had been released. I didn't even know about Labyrinth until years later. All I knew was the Dark Crystal. And so I borrowed my friend's VHS copy, and I didn't want to return it. And I watched it over and over and over, and that was kind of really... And then from there, it took over my life. Everything was about the Dark Crystal. I was trying to put on plays. I was trying to make puppets. Everything. I was trying my best. It was pretty fun.
Yeah, that's really cool, Jamie. For me, I'm sort of probably the same not same generation, but I mean, sort of the same generation of Dark Crystal fans that sort of, grew up with watching the films on VHS. I think there seems to be there's probably in a way three generations of the fans. There's people that saw it in the cinemas back in 1982, fans, people that grew up watching it on VHS, and then probably this generation now is people who, fans that have seeing it for the first time on DVD, Blu-ray, and all that kind of stuff, which is kind of cool that still, this film still holds up the test of time, even 35 years later. But yeah, I mean, like for me, my experience is always I always watched it on the VHS, and I believe it was actually recorded from a TV, so I never actually owned a copy of the film till I got it on the DVD years and years later. And I guess like just the film was just it was just, like you said, it is really unlike anything, and it's really out there. It's just an amazing film. Yeah, so I saw it as a kid, and at least watched it quite a lot. Probably on par. I remember watching like Return of the Jedi so many times, just because I think I loved the puppets and sort of I guess the magic. I guess when it comes to those films.
No, it really was, as a child, it was really magic. I mean, when, as you very well know, when you're growing up and you see things that you haven't seen before, it is a literal spell over you. You don't know how they did it. For me, a creature like Aughra was a living, breathing thing. There was no question in my mind that whatever Aughra was, she was alive. No question. To this day, I still see her the same way. I know that she's puppeted by Frank Oz. I know that she's constructed, but when I see Aughra, I only see a living, breathing thing. I have never made that leap, even though I understand how it was made, and that is the spell that cast over me. It was like, oh my God, what is this? And what are these creatures? And there's no people in them, and how did they do this? And again, to this day, I asked, as seeing the Dark Crystal last week in Hollywood at the Egyptian, I was still questioning. There's my favorite scene of any film of all time, when Jen and Kira jump off the mountain, and her wings float out, and they float down to the bottom, and they cut to a wide shot, and there's no visible strings, and the puppets are moving, and they're looking, and there's no visible strings, and then they get lower and lower, and they cut to a close up, and you can see them. She's trying to figure out where to land, and then they land perfectly. Like my mind is still blown by it. I mean, that's, people probably can hear it in the tone of my voice, how much of a spell this film has on me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess that will probably be your favorite minute to do when we reach to that minute. That scene with Kira and Jen, and Kira floating, gliding down with her wings. I'm just trying to think of what my favorite minute will be. Probably the introduction of Aughra's observatory. That's probably going to be one of my favorite minutes. Just the wonder in that room, and because of that moment where it starts off black, and Jen is like in this cave and walking, and he has no idea where he's going, and then the door opens up and just reveals Aughra's observatory, and he's just like blown away by it all. Yep. So I think that probably going to be one of my favorite minutes that I would certainly be looking for to discuss about. But yeah, I think with this, with the Dark Crystal now coming back in a big way, that I think this deserves a minute by minute dissecting analysis. I think which is great, and I mean, I certainly hope in future shows that we'll with this podcast that we'll have some special guests on to chat about the minute within the film with us. So no, which is great. And I guess with the Dark Crystal, who's your favorite character, I guess, in the film?
Oh, by far it's Kira. Yeah, there's just Catherine Mullen's performance of her. I mean, it was just absolutely realistic. Again, Kira, there's no question in my mind that she's a living, breathing character. And she kind of represents hope. She's our hope. Jen thought he was alone, and then he meets this girl, this kind of beautiful creature that kind of is his angel and guides him continually, shows him the way. She's like she's like the Galadriel in many ways. She reminds me of Galadriel, but she's not that specific kind of creature, but she's elvish and she's wise and she's connected to nature way more than Jen is. And she lives on the same planet, but she has a completely different experience of it, where everything is living and breathing and everything has worth. And it opens Jen's eyes up to a whole new understanding of this world he's always lived in. So I love watching the film when she's introduced to it through her eyes. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, she's a big favorite fan, big favorite character from the Dark Crystal, and there's always been a debate in fandom now and then about who really saved the whole day after all. Was it really Jen or was it Kira or all along sort of thing? So but I will say my favorite character. I mean, for me, I'd probably have to go with Jen. As much as I love Kira, Jen is probably one of my favorite characters. I think in a way because I sort of really relate to him, and I think also with the language with the Dark Crystal, the way the Gelflings speak is very basic, and it was something that I guess I always sort of emulate from films from time to time. When I'm watching a film and if they're talking this way, then I might, sort of emulate it, sort of, talking like them and in a way. But I think I was able to relate to Jen because as a child, I used to go see a speech therapist every week. I was diagnosed with autism at a very young age, and the biggest problem, the big main thing in that regard was more to do with the with communicating, saying words properly and whatnot. Like I couldn't, talk much at all, sort of thing. And I think because of the way the film is constructed with with that really basic English sort of language, that I felt like it was probably one of those films that I was able to really follow along the whole time, which I think is sort of, I was able to connect to. And also that, I guess, going back to Jen, that's sort of how I relate to Jen, in that way. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's a really wonderful story. I think, as you know, I have a nephew who's 8 who is severely autistic, and he doesn't speak. I mean, he'll make sounds and noises, and you have to kind of push him to say a word. Then I have my 4-year-old nephew Henry, who is also on the spectrum, but he can speak and he does. But as you're talking about that, I kind of see what you're talking about, because Henry's speech is basic like Jen's. But yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah. And I think that's probably, in a way, how the film sort of has deeply connects with me. So I just thought I wanted to, share that little story. It's something I sort of, I don't really talk too much about, having autism and whatnot. And, it's something like I still, do have it in a way. I mean, it's very, very mild. But it's still, I guess, it's a part of who I am. Yeah, I mean, and I guess like with the Dark Crystal, it's just something that, it's going to be really interesting going and chatting it each minute and really analyzing the film. So I certainly can't wait, with this whole show. So with the show is probably going to be about 95 episodes long. Could be more or less, sort of depending on things. But yeah, so I mean, we've got all these shows to look forward to. And also each show will probably be about half an hour long on average. So there'll be really small sort of bites.
Yeah, I'm excited. I think that there is a lot to get into. And as you were talking, and I was thinking also about different ways of viewing the Dark Crystal. And the Dark Crystal, it's many, many, many things. It's so many things. It's such a layered film in terms of process, in terms of storytelling. At the same time, it's a very visual film, and that's kind of an obvious statement. But I mean that in the sense that it uses the visuals, it uses the landscapes to tell the story. It doesn't rely so much upon exposition. It relies on landscape. It relies on the visuals to tell the story. Like we were discussing, when Jen goes into Augra's observatory, that whole scene, it was just in music and imagery. And we're experiencing it at the same time Jen is. And the story is being told like it's interesting. You look at it. Of course, we'll go into more depth when we get to that minute or two or whatever. But that scene, Jen, it's interesting because the door is open. It's in darkness, and the door is open. And so what he's seeing is this world's turning, things moving. So things have been going on in Thra that Jen has never known about, but it's been going, and Aughra has been there. She's been present, and all of that is told to us visually.
Yes, yeah.
So the film isn't just a visual feast; it's visual storytelling, and I'm excited to get into that with you because there's no one doing this.
No, there isn't. I mean, yeah, I mean, this is a big challenge, to do these sort of really deep insight, analyzing and dissecting, each minute. But I think I think we'll probably definitely get something out of it towards the end, and probably have a much deeper an even more deeper appreciation for the Dark Crystal. I mean, which we already have anyways, but so it'll just be exciting to see just if I mean, for me it would just be if I just notice something that I've never noticed before, because we're looking, watching each episode, looking at a minute at a time and just watching that minute, constantly, as we do, the research and whatnot for the shows. So, which is very, very cool stuff.
It is, and it's exciting because we're going to see things that we haven't seen before. Even though you and I have seen this film hundreds of times, we are going to discover things we haven't discovered before. And even at the screening in Hollywood last week, I discovered something at that screening that I'd never seen. And it was kind of like a slip up, like I saw Jim Henson's head.
Yeah.
And I'd seen his head before in another scene, but I saw his head again in this scene. But it didn't take away from it.
No.
If anything, the film is so magical and it's so spellbinding that you don't even think twice about it. It almost doesn't even register, as, here's the head of the puppeteer. I mean, these Jen and Kira and everyone else is so alive. They're so real that your eyes don't even register what it's seeing. So it's pretty cool.
Yes, yeah. Which is great. So, the podcast, I mean, this is now sort of the part of the Trial by Stone Dark Crystal podcast network. We've been making some changes with Trial by Stone going back to an interview sort of style show, and then adding these different podcasts as part of this network. It's sort of ever growing, and it's just very exciting to sort of for the fandom to come back to the Dark Crystal.
Absolutely. It's a great gateway into it. And after this, we're going to be seen as the experts.
Yeah. Yes.
I mean, I really think that people like us, where each of these minutes that we discuss this, I mean, it's pure love and appreciation. We'll be talking about actors and this and that, but really, I mean, it's all love. It's all born out of love, and it's a great time to be a fan right now. As we anticipate new behind the scenes videos and different probably images that are going to be released and updates about the new show. Yeah, I mean, it really is. It's and this sounds really funny to say, but in the beginning of the Dark Crystal, the narrator says this is the age of wonder, and really, I think we're there again. We're in that age of wonder where we're about to explore the world that we've always loved and seen in a way we've never seen it before, filled with gelflings, filled with a whole new world. And I can't wait.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we're really going to be rediscovering them all once again. I mean, especially with all the new media that's been coming out with the Dark Crystal, from graphic novels to comics and also to books as well. So and then also with this the Netflix show as well, which is just fantastic to go back to that visual storytelling, as you stated. Yeah.
What's interesting is what Netflix is attempting to do, no one is doing. No one has done. Sure, there are puppet shows. Sure, there's Sesame Street. On this type of scale, on this level, in terms of the budget that it's going to take, the investment, the time, the artists involved, no one has done this since Jim Henson. So this is the most exciting time to be a fan of the Dark Crystal, period.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I mean, there has been, quite a few puppet films like over the years, but nothing has really, matched up compared to the Dark Crystal. That's sort of like puppetry is sort of the top level, of puppetry 101 sort of thing. I can imagine. So, it's just fantastic, and it's just very exciting. And I mean, we can't wait to chat about more of the Dark Crystal in the next episodes to come. So stay tuned, and thank you so much. If you want to get in contact with us, you can do so at darkcrystalminute@gmail.com. You can like us on Facebook at facebook.com/darkcrystalminute, or follow us on Twitter at darkcrystalmin. This show is a part of the Trial by Stone and Dark Crystal podcast network. So if you can give a chance to give us a 5-star review on iTunes, gladly appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed the show and come back next time for more Dark Crystal Minute.